Welcome to Our Highest Work, a podcast about spiritually based business success, where we share the best ideas in how to create a true livelihood from a place of authentic connection to our highest calling. We are also creating a community of loving and wise mutual support, and as of this recording, that community is just beginning. My name is George Cow, and I'm excited to share with you today's episode, which is called Managing Our Patterns. And it's about creating and changing habits in our lives. And as always, I'd like to start with a quote. The quote here is from Aristotle, and you may have heard this one before, but I invite you to listen again with renewed understanding. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. So I invite you to think about that quote and how it might apply to your life. And as I go on, let me actually mention that there is a place to comment on this episode. The quote you just heard, if you have any thoughts on that, I invite you to comment on it. You can go to ourhighestwork.com/4, and that will bring you to the comments thread for this episode. If you're already watching the video, then you're already in the right place. Speaking of comments, let me talk about a comment that was mentioned about the previous episode. In episode 3, I talked about managing our priorities, and one of the priorities I talked about was health. And within health, I mentioned the importance of starting to work, or actually I should say, starting to stand more in your day instead of sitting all the time. Here in America, Americans sit probably most of the day and on their commute, and when they get to work, they're sitting. When they go home, they sit and watch television, or they sit in front of the computer. And I mentioned how starting a couple years ago, I started to stand as I worked. And I didn't have a standing desk back then. I just simply put a box on top of a desk, and I put some books on top of that box, and I put my laptop on top of those books, and I stood for as much as I could as I worked during the day. Eventually I found, actually in our home, we had I call this a high chair, but it's actually more of a director's chair or like a bar stool type of thing. So I put that behind me so I can occasionally sit down, but still be at more or less at that level. And so a comment from the last episode from Bob, he asked whether I had any suggestions for an affordable standing desk, because now, a couple years after I started doing that, I did buy a standing desk. And so I did a little bit of research. I was doing some research for someone else who had asked anyway, and I did find a link to an affordable standing desk, and I posted that link in the comments section of episode 3. So if you want to find that link, you go to the comments thread for episode 3, which is ourhighestwork.com/3. That's the number 3. And also, I want to thank those of you who have been leaving reviews of this podcast in iTunes. I'm so grateful. Every time I see a new review, it's like a little gift for me. So I'm just really grateful for you. I'll just kind of mention one review that just came through this morning, and it's from Tomar, actually. And Tomar says, I'm thrilled that George Cow, a passionate advocate for higher values in business, has started this podcast. It's really time for this message to reach a wider audience. She also wrote that she hasn't heard of many other business coaches speak so ardently about the concept of having enough rather than always more, 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 and also the need to put spiritual growth above financial gain, and to continually come back to that reminder. And so thank you, Tomar, for that review. I really appreciate it. And if you are listening or watching and want to leave a review for this podcast, it makes a big difference for other people to find this podcast, and it's like a gift from me every time I see it. And you can go to ourhighestwork.com/review to do that. Okay, so let me go on now to the segment of the episode about sort of a marketing tip. And every time the episode is about spiritual growth or personal development, I'll do a marketing tip and vice versa. When the episode is about marketing or business, I'll give a spiritual perspective. So here's about marketing here, and today's marketing tip is this. If you want to gather a community or a tribe of kindred spirits, the thing to focus on is to continually create great content in the world. Okay, so whether you're writing blog posts, or whether you're doing podcasts, or whether you're doing videos, or whether you're just on Facebook sharing inspirational thoughts and quotes and inspirational images and things like that, is to continually share great content in the world, and that's how you can create, start gathering your tribe. And I'll share 2 tips about great content. One is usefulness. The more useful your content is for your ideal audience, the people that you really want to reach, the more quickly you'll reach that audience, because every time you create useful, truly useful content, people who see that, your ideal audience member who sees that, will say, gosh, this is something that I know my friend, Mary can use. I'm going to send it on to her. So useful content creates viral sharing. And so in terms of creating useful content, one way of thinking about it is think about problems that you have solved in your life, or questions that you've been able to answer that you were struggling with for some time, and you believe that your ideal audience is also struggling with that question or that problem, but you've answered it, or you found some good answers to it. When you create a blog post or share on Facebook or create a podcast or video about the answer to that question, you are being useful to your ideal audience. Okay, so that's the one, is being useful. The second thing is consistency. And if you dedicate yourself to a regular schedule of content creation, you will be able to gather a loyal tribe. Because if you're not consistent, if you're not on a regular schedule, the regular schedule is the best way of being consistent. And so what I suggest, so for example, in this podcast, I've committed to a schedule of every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific and every Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific is when I record these episodes live, and you can join me for the live commenting on the episodes, or you can trust that you'll be able to get download those episodes soon afterwards, right? So dedicate yourself to a regular schedule, and it's much easier to dedicate yourself to a regular schedule when you are creating content that you are passionate about, that you enjoy doing. Like, I so enjoy doing these podcasts for you. So that really motivates me to keep doing them. But the other motivation is when you are creating content that's useful, and you're getting reviews or getting comments from your audience, that motivates you even further to continue on that regular schedule. So to end this tip, I always like to share a resource. And the resource I want to share with you today is actually someone else's podcast episode. And this podcast episode is by Dave Ramsey when he was interviewing Seth Godin. So the way to find that podcast is to just go to google.com and search Dave Ramsey, Seth Godin, episode 55. Again, go to google.com, search Dave Ramsey, Seth Godin, episode 55, and I encourage you to listen to that episode. It really had a deep influence on me. Okay, so on to today's topic, which is about habit creation and habit change. Why is this important? Now, you probably know why it's important, but it's always inspirational to hear the reasons why, and hopefully this will give you some more energy to actually create some change in your life in terms of habits. So remember this: you are a bundle of habits. You are walking around doing things, reading things, thinking thoughts. The vast majority of those things are actually habitual. You're not consciously thinking of doing every single thing. So if you want to change your life, change your habits. If you want to transform the experience you have in your life, consciously work on a daily basis, consciously work on your habits. So besides being a bundle of habits, you have been given a brain to change those habits. And I want to give you a resource to look further into this, what's called neuroplasticity, the ability to change your habits by changing your brain, actually. What's amazing is that you have been given the consciousness of being able to change your brain, which of course changes your habits. So the resource I want to give you, again, you can go to google.com and search this, is go to google.com and search fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And just read a couple of the top articles that are there. It will change the way you think about your brain and change the way you think about how possible is it to change yourself. Very powerful. So, what kind of life do you want to be living? What kind of world do you want to live in? You can create that life and you can create that world by today consciously focusing on your habits and tomorrow consciously focusing on your habits and the day after and the day after. And you will look back and before you know it, you'll be surprised that, oh my gosh, I'm living the life that I wanted to live. And I'm living, the world is more the kind of world that I want to live in because the world as you experience it is actually through your eyes, and if you change your habits, part of that is about changing your thoughts, changing your emotional life, and the world you live in will actually change. And of course, when you change your habits in terms of how you're mindfully active in the world begins to change around you as well, your local community, the environment, etc., because you can actually make that kind of a change, starting with you. So let me take a pause and just say that in each of these Our Highest Work episodes, you're going to hear many bits of wisdom, I hope, and tips and advice. And I encourage you just to listen for one best nugget of wisdom, one best idea that you want to implement, that you want to remember and actually take action on in your life. And this is true for every type of information that you consume in your life. Articles that you read, episodes that you listen to or watch, okay? When you do those things, what do you do? Do you consume a lot of information and do you always take action on them? Because if you are in the habit of consuming information but not taking action, that has become a habit that's been solidified for you. And starting today, I want to encourage you to change that habit of not just consuming information and then not doing anything, because that becomes a habit, and the consuming of the information becomes something that feels good, but your life remains more or less the same over time. So the thing to do is from now on, every article you read, every episode you listen to, just read or listen for one best thing. Yes, the article will have 10 best things, or this episode may have 20 great things you could implement. Listen for one best thing that you can implement. Because you can always come back to this episode later. You can always read that article later. Don't be too ambitious. Because you read articles and blog posts all the time, right? Or listen to things all the time. Listen for one best thing. That's what I do in my life. That's how I'm able to change my life relatively more quickly than many of my peers. I listen for one best thing to remember and actually take action on that week. So I invite you to do that. And as you hear that one best thing for you in this episode, I invite you to comment on our episode page and let us know, us meaning myself here, and the your community in Our Highest Work, know what is that one best thing for you that you want to implement. So thank you. And right now I do want to thank Tomar is actually here live in the episode comments page, commenting away. So thank you so much, Tomar. Okay, so let me now go on to the framework for changing habits. And I'm going to share with you a relatively simple framework that I'm hoping it's not too difficult to remember and that you can actually take action on, because there have been books and books over the years, dozens of books, maybe hundreds, written about habit change. There have been thousands, maybe millions of articles perhaps by this point written about habit change. So I want to just share with you my perspective at this time in my development, a simple framework to change your habits and to create habits. The first step is, and this is something that we often forget, the first step in habit change is to consciously commit. And here's what I mean. Not just, oh, I would like to, wouldn't it be great to exercise more? Oh yeah, you know, and you're telling your friends, oh yeah, I'd like to, you know, meditate more or pray more. Oh, I'd like to work on my hobbies more. By consciously committing, this is what I'm saying. Say out loud to yourself with vigor and with passion, today, from now on, I commit to doing XYZ. And we'll talk about what XYZ is in the coming framework here. The other way, excuse me, that you can consciously commit is to write down your commitment several times. Today, I passionately commit to doing XYZ. And write it down several times. That's what I mean by conscious commitment, not just offhand comments here and there to other people, but to say with vigor and passion, I consciously commit. Now, when you're saying that you're consciously committing, and when you're writing this down, it's really helpful to also list your best reasons for why you're committing. Don't just commit because you're getting reasons from some expert who is saying that exercise is good for you. If those reasons compel you, you might want to say them or write them down. But do it for your own reasons. And you have your reasons. Maybe it's because you're afraid of your health is going in a certain direction you want it to go, and maybe you're genetically you come from a line of people who have certain health issues. You don't want to go. You don't want to experience that either. Maybe it's you're doing it for your children. Maybe you're doing it for your friends. Maybe you're doing it because you want a lot more energy, and you know you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? List your reasons passionately. Okay. So, all right. So that's the first step, is to consciously commit and to do it in a passionate way that really inspires you. Now, let me give you. I mentioned the XYZ, what you're committing to. Okay. 5 questions to ask yourself. 5 questions. Who, what, where, when, why. Who, what, where, when, why. And I always like to try to keep things to 5 if possible, because you can then see it on your hands. You can count with your fingers. Who, what, where, when, why. Okay, number 1, who. So ask these questions about your new habit that you want to create. Who? Who will you update about your habit? The more people, the better. Okay? And ask these people to actually ask you about the habit. Ask you about how it's going. So it may be some friends that you ask. It may be even your Facebook friends. On Facebook, you can create what's called a friend list. It's a tool on Facebook called a friend list. And then you can share updates specifically to just that friend list. Some updates will go to just that friend list. Other updates will go to all your friends, etc. So think about creating a friend list of people that you know. Or you can ask them, hey, would you be willing to support me in creating this habit? And they say yes. Put them into a friend list, and you'll be sharing your update to just that friend list. So think about that. Okay, who will you update about your habit? Find that today, or start getting yeses today. Ask them to ask you about it. So who? Secondly, what specifically is the behavior? So for example, so that's the what, right? Who and what. What specifically is the behavior? It's not enough to say I'm going to exercise more, or I'm going to meditate more. Okay, I'm going to be nicer to people. Be specific. So exercise more could be specific in terms of I'm going to exercise 30 minutes 5 times a week. But first, I'm going to start with. It's always good to try to taper up if you can, if you want to. You can. There's actually 2 ways of creating a habit. One is revolutionarily, and the other way is evolutionarily. I know a lot of habit experts say, "Oh, start small and build up." I disagree. I think that if you are so inspired, you can start big, knowing that if you fail, you can always go back to starting small and going up, right? But hey, why not try starting big, and then hey, if it sticks, wonderful. But if it doesn't stick, you can remember, most habit experts say start small. So if exercising 5 times a week for 30 minutes a day doesn't work for you, you tried it, all right, start with just 10 minutes once a week, right? Start tiny, start so small that you'll be like, well, of course I can do that. That's so easy, right? So, but what specifically is the behavior? So that's the what. Okay. Another example, if you say, I'm going to be nicer to people from now, and that's not enough to say, I'm going to be nicer. So the habit might be, every time I become conscious that I'm talking with someone, I will consciously make a gentle smile on my face. Even if you're on the phone, you can make a gentle smile on your face, because that changes your mood so that you can actually be nicer. Or you might say, every time I start talking to someone, I will think of them as my family member. I'll think of them as my grandmother or my grandfather, or someone you feel soft in your heart towards. Maybe your children. So someone you feel soft towards. Think about them as someone you feel soft towards. and then talk to them in that kind of loving way, okay, with more love. So as an example, the what is very important to map out specifically what it is. And if you need help mapping out what that is, you can always comment in our episode page and ask this community, hey, how can I map out this particular behavior that I want to do? I want to exercise more. Any ideas, right? For example. Okay. The third question is where? Who, what, where? Where is this new behavior going to happen? Because here's an important thing to know about habits. Habits, if they are to be successful, are connected to what's called a trigger. A trigger is something that's already occurring regularly in your life. So for example, if you say that you want to exercise 5 times a week for 30 minutes a day, what is the trigger? Where is it going to happen? So the trigger is every time you, I'm sorry, this is actually probably not a good example. Let's say that you want to do some mindful breathing. I'll use that example. My trigger for learning mindful breathing was whenever I'm about to wash my hands, when I touch the faucet and it feels cold. So the where is in my bathroom. Okay, in my bathroom, that's the where. That's when I start to remind myself, oh yeah, mindful breathing. Before I turn on the faucet, breathe a few times. Okay. So where are you going to do? Same thing with if you want to be nicer to people. Where have you found yourself wanting to be nicer to people? Maybe it's at your office in a particular meeting room. Maybe it's in your home in the dining room. You want to learn to be nicer to your family. Maybe it's when you go to a particular type of event. Maybe you go to church and you want to learn to be nicer to people there. So where, okay? Where is that new habit going to take place? Picture it in your mind. 4 is when, okay? Who, what, where, when. When is the habit going to happen? So for me, the exercise is a good one. Again, trigger, okay? When I exercise 5 times a week, it's very important for me to know that I do that around 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. And when I say around, because I actually have it in my schedule, I have it in my calendar as a recurring event. But because the way my calendar works, I use an online calendar, Google Calendar, I can move that exercise half hour up or down a little bit at the beginning of my day. If I have an appointment, I can move that down, up, but I always do it every day. So when do I do it? I know it's around 4 p.m. every single day. Okay, and then why? Very important. Who, what, where, when, why? Right? Why are you doing this new habit? It's not enough just to say science says it's good for me. It's very important for you to come up with your personal reasons that motivate you, maybe even bring you to tears about why you're doing it. Okay. All right. So another very important thing to ask yourself, who, what, where, when, why. Let me add on another one, which is how. Okay? And the how question is this. How will I recover when I fall down in that habit? Remember this. Creating a habit, chances are, if you're like any other human being, right, chances are you're not going to get 100%. Okay? But you're not going to, if you promise to exercise 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day, and you fall down, like, oh my God, I didn't do it yesterday. Terrible. I'm going to stop doing it. I just can't do it anymore. No. Have a plan for when you backslide and when you fall down. What is your consciousness going to tell you? What are you going to tell yourself? Tell yourself this. Oh, okay. So remember, habit is about the long term. How much I do it in the long term. So I can change my future by changing what I decide to do today. So I didn't do it yesterday. Well, I'm going to do it today. Well, let's say it's almost at the end of your day and you wanted to exercise today for half an hour and you didn't do it at the end. It's almost time to go to bed. Here's what you're going to do. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to walk vigorously down the hallway to my bedroom. That's will be my exercise for the day. It's more important that you adhere to your habit than doing it perfectly. So let me say this again. When creating a habit, adherence is more important than perfection. Adherence to the habit is more important than perfection. So if you wanted to meditate 10 minutes a day, and at the end of the day, oh my gosh, I didn't meditate today, just say, oh, I'm going to meditate for 30 seconds, and then I will check that off. And tomorrow I will go back to aiming to meditate for 10 minutes a day. Adherence is more important than perfection. So how will I take care of myself when I backslide? Oh, I'll just adhere and do a tiny little bit before I go to bed. Okay? So, all right, so I've just got a few more left before the end of the episode. And what I'd like to do is to share with you one way that you can actually structure yourself to do these habits, and then we will end the episode with a quote and just a couple of logistical items. Okay, so actually, before I go on, I want to thank Tomar again for commenting actively here. Right now, our highest work community is still relatively small, and so it really does make a difference for me when some of you decide to show up for these live episodes and comment actively as you're watching it. And as this community grows, you'll notice that the commenting becomes, first it's one person, then it's going to be 2 people, 3 people, 4, 5, and it gets really exciting. So as you're watching this, think about joining us next time for the live episode, Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern. And that's one way that the community starts to grow, is when you're commenting actively and interacting actively with other people. Okay, so back to the habits. One of the ways to structure your habit into your life is to look at your calendar. Okay, so to look at your calendar. And I've already mentioned this, that I actually schedule in my exercise habit. But I invite you to take out your calendar today and ask yourself, the habit that I want to create, when is it going to happen, and can I put that into my calendar? Because if I put that in my calendar, that's going to be more likely, if I'm assuming you look at your calendar at least once a day, right? At least hopefully in the morning, you look at your calendar, what do I have on my calendar today? So if you have it on your calendar every day, then at least you're going to see it, and that's going to remind you. Another way to structure your habit into your life is to use reminders on your phone. Now, even if some of you have a smartphone, obviously you can schedule recurring reminders on your smartphone, but even not smartphones, mobile phones, many of them have an alarm that you can set that happens daily. So think about using alarms and try to make that alarm more pleasant to hear. So on smartphones, you can generally change the sound of the alarm and try to make a sound that's pleasant to hear on your phone, okay? So whatever you carry with you, a phone, your watch, think about scheduling a reminder on there. That's really, really helpful. I have several reminders daily on my phone that go off every single day. If I didn't have those, the habits would be much harder. Okay? So with that, let me end this episode by mentioning a couple things. One is that if you want to be reminded about our upcoming episodes, and I always send out an email for those who want to be reminded about every episode, I send out an email about half an hour in advance. And so you can go to ourhighestwork.com, our main website, and you can sign up for that email reminder if you wish to join us live. And if you like today's episode, if you found that this habit creation framework and some of the examples I gave are helpful, and you can think of one other person that is also looking to change their habits, I invite you to send this video to them, or send this episode to them. ourhighestwork.com/4. This is episode 4. So send that link to them. I always say, don't let the episode end with you, but let it go on. Pass it onward to the next person so that you can bless them as well. And hopefully this habit creation message can continue to be shared in the world, and hopefully they'll help change the world to make it a better place. And lastly, what did you like about today's episode? What is that one best nugget you're going to implement? One best nugget you'll implement. You can always listen to it later, and once you've implemented that one nugget, listen to it later and implement another one. But what is that one best nugget you'll implement? Share it with me in the episode page, ourhighestwork.com/4. Okay, so let me end with a quote, which is from John Irving, and the quote is this: "Good habits are worth being fanatical about." And I think John Irving was very wise, because he knows that our life changes when our habits change. So good habits are worth being fanatical about. So what is a habit in your life today that you want to be fanatical about? I wish you a day forward filled with peace, filled with passion for your habits, and filled with joy as you implement something that will improve your habits. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, be well.